I'd like to welcome everybody to another House of Bricks Live. We're really picking up the pace with these live events, getting great feedback, and continuing to share the message of the House of Bricks, turning obstacles into stepping stones and building brick by brick. And we've been at this for a couple years now. We've followed our own model of testing, failing, learning, and growing. And what has really resonated with people is the impact that we want to make with veterans, how they're recognized, how they're honored, and most importantly, empower them to transition from the battlefield to the boardroom. And it's just been an awesome journey, a lot of struggling. We definitely spent our full 80% of our time in the struggle zone, but starting to get some clarity on that. But if this is your first time joining, make sure you subscribe to our Substack newsletter. Lots of great entrepreneurial guidance in there. We have a special section for veterans, so a lot more to come on that, but feel free to check it out. So getting into today's guest, we're joined by Eric Smith, a Navy veteran and senior business development leader, and he has a passion for clean technology and resilient energy solutions, drawing on years of active duty deployments. He has a strategic mindset and a people-first approach. Eric's built a career around solving tough challenges and driving impact. He's a ferocious leader. I got stuck on, maybe I need to read more. So Paul threw that in there to throw me off, but a believer in the golden rule and someone who lives to serve Aloha daily. So Eric, it's an honor to have you here, and welcome to the House of Bricks Live.
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Paul, thanks for throwing that in there. But listen, love to hear just a little bit more about your story. A defining moment you've shared, that your tour as a inspector general at Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa in 2007, 2008 really changed your trajectory. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I was about halfway through my tour, my career. I did about 25 years, not including the academy. And so 2007 was about halfway through. It was a individual augmentee tour. A lot of veterans will know that term very well. It was jokingly a cartoon shared in the ready room that I was the guy who was never at meetings. So invariably the CO would volunteer me for stuff. Well, I got volunteered for Iraq 6 times and thankfully got turned down. Don't really care to get in the shooting environment, but IG and Djibouti came up and I volunteered, and he was like, nope, can't do that. And I'm like, oh, watch me. Commodore was my first skipper, so off I went to Djibouti for a year. And then when you are a Navy 04 and an Air Force 05 billet working for a Navy 2-star admiral, nobody knows what the hell you're there for. Oh, the beauty of it is that I got a lot of downrange travel. I got to engage with 90% Army reservists who I'd never engaged with before in my career. And it really was eye-opening. So not only are you thrust into this third world country relative to the rest of the developed civilized world, now you're working with Army civilians, Army reservists, NGOs in the front line. So you really get to see firsthand how the rest of the world lives outside of America. And I've jokingly told people, when you go overseas and you come back, you really appreciate how good we have it in America. But that was a big game changer for me.
No, I can see that for sure. And, if you've been following the House of Bricks at all, we've kind of developed this model called testing, failing, learning, and growing, right? A lot of people don't take that first step, so they're automatically disqualified. Some people stop at failing because they don't want to experience that again. But what really separates people is when you can learn from that failure and start growth. So we really believe, the best lessons in life, they don't come from polished wins. Anyone that's built something successful know it's very, very messy. You've talked about a detachment you led in Key West in 2006. That didn't go as planned, I assume. So let's walk through that. What were you trying to accomplish?
So we were coming off of a 6-month deployment to the Western Pacific, and I happened to be in one of our F-18 ready rooms. I flew for a U-2 squadron, and they were talking about this event in Key West coming up in October. Mind you, this was in the deployment, so July of 2006. We were getting back to the West Coast in August. So it was a very short timeline. And they were saying, hey, it'd be really great if we had some Hawkeye support for this exercise. And I'm like, all right, hey guys, that's in the short hairs. We got to figure out how we can get that planned. Now, I'd never been to Key West before other than a couple of detachments, but I knew enough to figure out, hey, it's aviation world, it's Key West, Florida. Surely they could flex. If I say I'm coming in with a squadron and we're going to rent a bunch of cars, rent a bunch of rooms, and take up a lot of ramp space, everyone's going to be okay with the influx of cash. I told him, I was like, I can take it back to the skipper, see what he says. I'm sure his first answer and his second answer are going to be no, hell no. But we'll see what we can do. And it basically was put to me that good luck pulling it off. And we managed to get everything set up and reserved and deployed on time. Actually deployed a few days early, thankfully. We had one bird breakdown en route from Point Mugu, California to Key West, Florida. But we managed to get everyone in place. We did the exercise. A lot of people got personal awards out of it. I was not one of them. And that was really the key learning point for me of it doesn't matter how well your team succeeds, how well they perform. If you truly care about the people, you'll let your personal misgivings go by the wayside. I still don't talk to that skipper anymore. It was one of those things that I'm in touch with a lot of the troops who worked for me at the time.
So let's drill into the failure part a little more. What did you think that would go right that didn't? And there's always that one thing that you don't have a ton of confidence in that all of a sudden, like that one small step, like how did that make such an impact?
So two things I did not plan on that happened. One was we would have a windshield strike and have to put it in over Oklahoma. So no one can anticipate what the hell happens when material failures occur. But if you have a depressurization of the Hawkeye, you got to put in and change out the windshield. So we were able to actually, because we were flying Navy Reserve aircraft for our troops and our maintainers, we called them en route. We were flying 2 aircraft in formation and then the 747 with the troops. We basically called them up and said, look, we need to divert into Oklahoma for repairs. So we basically had our own traveling roadshow with us. They dropped in, did the repairs, got back on the plane, gassed up, and went on to Key West. The second one was when you're coming off deployment, especially a Navy deployment on a carrier, you got to remember saltwater will take its effect on material, specifically metal brakes on an aircraft. In the middle of the exercise, we got to the hold short, ready for takeoff for the exercise area, and the pilots could not release the brakes on the aircraft because they literally corroded in a closed position. So the fighters went off and did the exercise. We had a contingency plan in place to do short control from the tax range. So basically beacons on the aircraft. And in the process, controlled the whole exercise, got the controllers over to that tax range, and the event was done. In the middle of the debrief, the 18s were like, oh my God, how did you guys do that from the end of the runway? We were like, oh, little known fact. Well, we always have a secondary plan in place. So that was one of those that was like, we didn't really think that through in terms of not having enough freshwater washdowns when we were on deployment that eventually would come back to haunt us.
Well, you'd be a perfect entrepreneur. I don't think anything through. I just I just push the ball forward. So but again, that's what creates that flywheel of, testing, failing, learning, and growing. I mean, you talked about some of the things that you learned in the process, but what's the big key takeaway that you got from this experience in terms of learning?
I knew I could overcome any challenge. There's some things we can't change, time and physics. So barring everything aside from that, it's all a matter of initiative and talking it through and have conversations. At the end of the day, everyone's a person and a human. You appeal to them at certain levels and invariably you can make stuff happen.
Well, you're kind of describing the growth there, but was there things that you went through here in this experience that really turned you into the leader you are today?
It was an unfortunate case of what I thought was just early career events turned to be a common theme over the entire course of my career, which is you should be able to learn something from everyone. You would like to think you learned something good, something inspirational, something that sets you up well for success down the road. My entire career, with a few exceptions, was built on bad leadership examples. So I took everything from the academy to early Navy career to mid-career and basically said, look, I don't care for the leadership. I don't care for your personnel style, but I'll take that to heart in terms of what am I going to do going forward when I'm in a position of leadership or authority? And it's the exact opposite of the example I was given. So the beauty is yeah, you can learn something from everyone, even if it's not positive.
Yeah, I have these conversations all the time with founders, entrepreneurs, right? I'm in a bad situation, and with the right mindset, life is the best teacher. And one thing I do tell people though is just because you're failing doesn't mean you're on the right track. Like, you do have to stop and say, hey, maybe this is not the best idea. But I want to dig deeper, just talking to you about the people skills you've learned, but the better ones, like you said, kind of learn from their mistakes. How has riding a motorcycle later in life shifted your perspective on risk?
So I was at the Pentagon at the time. I had a 3-hour round trip commute, living in Annapolis, Maryland, commuting. So I would drive to New Carrollton, hop on the metro, take the metro, and change trains and get to the Pentagon. That eventually shifted from driving to riding a bus. So I'd walk to the corner of my neighborhood, etc. I ended up changing offices at the Pentagon and landed in an office full of people who lived to the west of the Pentagon but commuted on a motorcycle every day. I was like, hey, I always wanted to ride a motorcycle. Maybe I'll go out and get my license. When you get into a um, very susceptible environment where you are open to everyone else's risk tolerances, you kind of start approaching life differently. I'm not saying it's you're wide open and exposed and everyone else is in a cage from the physical harm standpoint, but your mentality has to shift. So I very quickly started thinking about everyone's trying to kill you the minute you get on the bike. But where that takes it into something different is you start to appreciate life around you. You pick up on the smells, you hear things. You now come into a risk management process. You start to consider other aspects that people who just live life, to be blunt, safely in a car in their nice air conditioned environment don't necessarily think about all those other operational risk challenges that you're faced with on a daily basis. And so that's really carried forward for me. I rode a motorcycle in Hawaii as well. There I was faced with really the worst weather I'd ever seen riding a motorcycle. And that was coming out of the DC area, which already has bad weather. But it was the same thing. It really taught you, kind of coming into the work environment, what am I looking at? What am I in terms of risk mitigations and concerns? How does this impact our tolerances going forward?
Yeah, I love that. And I always think I've always wanted a motorcycle. I just never pulled the trigger. When I moved down to South Florida from Michigan, I would see these, elderly people, like they couldn't even drive the shopping cart in CVS and then go get and then they're getting in a car and driving home. I'm like, I'm not ready to play those odds yet. But here in Michigan, I there's enough open space. I might have to actually pull the trigger on that. So moving on, and I can't wait to hear this answer. When your therapist was talking to you about what retirement looks like, you avoided the question. I have to know why.
I'm not ready to hang it up. And I think that's kind of imbued in every veteran. The adage, there's no points for second place. The loser is the one who doesn't finish first. It's just one of those things that never crossed my mind that I'm never going to quit working. I'm never going to quit contributing to something bigger than myself. He's asked me a couple times. I've tried to give it some thought, but it kind of gets to the point of I'm just not done yet. There's more to life out there. And the beauty is that the world we live in, I tell my youngest this now, I'm like, dude, there are things that I had growing up that you've never experienced. It is a wonderful time to be alive. And the beauty is not just technology, but travel, opportunity, the world we live in, the way the administration is changing. It creates a wealth of opportunity. The hard part is, as a veteran, we carry baggage with us into any role or any assignment. And I think that was the biggest thing that frustrated me was the therapist was like, hey, have you thought about retirement? It's like, I'm not there yet. I need to clear stuff out of here before I can think about hanging it up or slowing down.
No, I love that. And I'm certainly on board with that mentality. I honestly don't know what I would do. And whatever I did, I would get bored pretty quickly. I mean, I've exited a couple companies, and 2 weeks in, you can only play so much golf. Like I got to make an impact on people's lives, right? I'm not
Once
letting
you're a founder once, you're a founder for life.
founder for life. This is what I was created to do, and I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't building businesses and empowering others. So, is your perspective on retirement change now? I mean, we're kind of answering that question. I don't even know if you want to or will at some point.
No, I'm not. In fact, the reason I left my last two companies was I had the benefit of that Navy retirement pension and a disability. Um, a recruiter told me once, they're like, "Hey, you actually have FU money." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You can tell poor leadership to F off and go
Yeah.
find something else to do." And after that, it was the kind of, "Hey, why am I working 14-hour days? Why am I working Sunday night to prep for Monday leadership meetings? I don't need this. This is
Mm.
not a stressor I look for after the military." So I basically told my boss at the time, I'm like, "Hey, this isn't working. I'm going to go do something else." And it reminded me of the 2006 deployment to Key West. You can't do that. It was like, watch me.
Right.
And I gave notice, left the company, and I heard afterwards a bunch of the people who worked for me ended up leaving as well. They're like, "I don't have you as the screen between you and your boss." I'm like, "Oh, is that a oh you're welcome or a thank you?"
Yeah. I mean, poor leadership is a great teacher, isn't it? Like when you when you're underneath someone, and again, I say that hesitantly because being a leader, right? Everyone's looking at you. And so, there's mistakes you're going to make, but I think with the right character mindset and integrity and, being open to feedback, that's the one thing I have always tried to do as a leader is be open to feedback. Like that is something that, anyone wants to follow in terms of, how can I get better? How can I grow? So the slogan, electrify everything, is super powerful. What do you think keeps people from embracing that fully?
It's something new. I mean, we all know humans are resistant to change. Um, but take, for example, electric cars. It's a very polarizing statement, especially from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. But you take away all the politics, you take away policy, and it really comes down to butts and seats. And a lot of people are like, "Eric, you can't say that in a professional environment." I'm like, but it's true.
Right.
Get your butt in the driver's seat or the passenger seat and drive.
Mm.
Figure out how this tool works for you in a realistic environment. And people are very shocked and they come back. It's kind of like I saw a cartoon this morning. All the people in the room who hate Tesla, raise your hand. A bunch of people raise their hand. All the people in the room who hate Elon. It's like, well, do you hate the brand or do you hate the person? Because
Right.
the brand is actually a very good product and it's a very reliable service. Just because it's an egomaniac who's the richest person in the world and in charge of the company doesn't mean you should necessarily hate the brand. And so it's interesting because if you haven't driven it, if you haven't experienced it, how can you really talk to it? It goes back to leadership. Walk a mile in your customer's shoes before you try to tell them why it's a good product. And if you can't believe it or you don't believe in it yourself, why are you trying to sell it?
I raised my hand because I had a Tesla, and all it took was the battery dying one time, and I drove it straight back to the dealership. I was like, I'll take the Range Rover back." So I will be forever in a gas vehicle as long as they're around. But that's a story for another day. But so bring into your current focus. What are you working on right now that has you excited?
It goes back to the entrepreneurial comment. I had it on my LinkedIn profile for a bit. I took it off. I was getting a whole lot of questions. "Oh, you're in stealth. You're in startup. We can help you scale this. We can help you scale that." I'm like, I don't need your help. I'm a self-funded startup. But it's the idea that I realized, and my whole adult life, I've had a salary. So I've expected a minimum wage type thing. But if you have truly FU money, it's like, well, you can actually go follow your dream and do what you want to do. So I have this idea of a startup that is basically addressing a gap in the customer journey for electric vehicle adoption. I can't find myself to commit to making a website and selling the service to the public. So it's one of those that kind of sits over here on my shoulder like, You gonna ever get around to doing this? Because you obviously feel passionate about it. But on the flip side, it's like, yeah, maybe I'll just keep doing a job for someone else until I actually get off my butt and do it.
Oh, I love that. And I know you're a, clean technology guy. So, but I just say how I'm feeling with the, with the Teslas and the EVs. Maybe you can convince me to get one again. I don't know. But,
my first, hey, on a side note, my first electric vehicle was a motorcycle. So
okay.
You want 100% torque. The beauty is the basic motorcycle course foundation are now starting to allow initial driver's license for motorcycle certification to test on an electric motorcycle. So who knows? You might have an opportunity in your local area.
There we go. That would solve two things. Give me an electric vehicle and on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, I want to thank you for joining the House of Bricks Live. Any closing thoughts or things that you want us to talk about?
The biggest thing, and I know it's in here, the global South, I came across in an interview. It's a reminder that the world is, I don't want to be colloquial or proverbial, the world is your oyster, but there's a lot of people out there who have life worse off than us. And the beauty is that, like I say, try to live aloha daily and live by the golden rule is pay it forward where you can, especially with another veteran, but just be a good human to your fellow human.
Yeah, and that reminds me as well. We talk about just those, moments and building community for veterans when they leave the service. What would be important to you as a veteran, kind of transitioning into civilian life from a business perspective, finance perspective, community?
I think what I hear from fellow veterans is the veteran is told to take off the uniform and walk away from the identity of the job or the title or the role you had. But where I think like employers don't quite realize is just ask if they're a veteran and leave it at that. Don't ask if they were an officer and enlisted. Don't ask what their MOS or their pay grade was. Take away that association and realize that you have a natural born leader, someone who's driven, someone who's not going to just take no for an answer, and test them, push them, put them in your most demanding roles. You'll be surprised because they usually will step in and they'll bring people along with them, and your organization will benefit as a result of it. And that's the hardest part of the off resume skill set trying to convey to a future employer.
I love that. And I know I've made some mistakes as well. I'm not a veteran. My grandfather was, but, I have a great passion to serve and honor them. So it's just kind of educating leaders, right? I mean, they're asking these questions, thinking they're building relationship, but it seems, some of those are unnecessary, right? It's just understanding that they'll succeed in those high pressure situations.
It's interesting. Probably easily half of the most recent interviews I've had are solely focused on leadership and mentorship. And while it's not part of the job interview prep that I do a little mental visualization, but because I've lived it for so long, I truly believe it. And I write it down. I live by the golden rule. I serve aloha daily because I try to pay it forward for my fellow human, my fellow veteran. But it is interesting, and maybe it's what I'm propagating to for my next role, my next opportunity.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your story, your perspective with us today, your journey from, the Navy deployments to building solutions and clean technology. It really shows the power for me, just a reminder of the importance of resilience, being curious, and leadership. So for everyone watching this episode of the House of Bricks, this is really what we're all about. We're testing, we're failing, we're learning, we're growing brick by brick, vet by vet. And Eric, it's really been a privilege for us to have you on today. So I know our team will put your information. If people want to get in contact with you or learn more about what you're up to, we'll be sure to get them in touch with you. So thanks again for joining the House of Bricks Live, and thank you for your service.
No, thank you, Adam. It's nice following you.
Thank you.